Hello, this is Jamie Mayrich. Welcome to Jamie's Craft Table. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card. It's got that nice dry embossing here and then gold embossing here. I know this is the card that inspired it, or it's a similar. It has the falling snow one, but this one's a little more difficult because you punch it out and drop it in. So let's get started. Quite a bit of supplies this time. Well, it looks like quite a bit. I'm going to be using some of the Boho Indigo gold ribbon. I have a gold foil circle already die cut out, and that's die cut from the second largest of the stitch shaped circles. I'm going to be using Snowfront. And I'm also going to be using the trees from Mountain Air. I'm going to be using gold embossing powder and the Evergreen Forest 3D embossing folder. For cardstock, I have a scrap of Whisper White. This just needs to be big enough to punch out with a 2 1/4 inch circle. I have a piece of Whisper White, which is 4 by 5 1/4, a piece of gold foil, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, a card base, which is 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, scored and folded at 4 1/4. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take the 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of Whisper White and run it through my embossing folder. I'm going to line it up with this line on front of the embossing folder just to make it a little bit straighter. And run it through my embossing folder. And this is what we get. It's nice and embossed. Okay. So I'm going to adhere that to the front of my gold piece. I'm going to use Tombow Mono. You don't want to use too much because you don't want it oozing out onto your gold. And you could die cut your circle out of this. I just had a scrap I used instead. Set that aside. Put something on it, see if I can get it to stay on. Okay, let's do the stamping. We're going to be using Basic Gray and Versamark. So we're going to take this stamp with the 2 trees. And this one is from the Mountain Air. I'm going to stamp this once without re-inking. We're going to move it over and up and stamp again. Okay. Now we're going to bring it over here, down a little. We're going to do it again. We're going to stamp it without re-inking. We're going to stamp over here. Let's just do it here. Okay. And we're going to come in with the single tree. And over here we're going to stamp it without re-inking. We're going to move it over here and stamp it. One more time, we're going to bring it down here. Without re-inking, we're going to stamp it over here. Okay, now let's clean off these stamps. I'm going to use my chamois here because I don't want to get this gray ink on my Versamark. Done with the gray ink. Use my embossing buddy because I have it. Okay, now ink this tree, double tree up once. And just to the left of this tall tree, but lower than it, it's going to be between the heights of these two trees. I'm going to stamp it down. Okay, then I'm going to bring in the single one. I'm just going to pick a spot. Right there, I guess. Stamp it down. Close my embossing powder, my Versamark, so I don't get embossing powder in it. Bring in gold embossing powder. Oh dear. I got a whole center there that didn't get any embossing powder on it. Well, I'll show you how we'll fix that. We're going to bring in, well, let me heat set this first. Well, we can just do it. We're going to bring in the blender pen, and I'm going to dip it in the embossing powder, or in Versamark. I'm just going to dip it in there, and I'm just going to tap in some Versamark in here so it's not totally hollow. And then add a little bit of embossing powder on there. Well, that's not bad. You can still see it a little bit, but we'll go with this for now. And then we can add more if we need to. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my board. 2 reasons: it keeps my surface area from getting hot, and it helps dissipate the heat so that it embosses a little more evenly. There it goes. I'm not sure I'm going to need to add anything in there, but if I did, I'll just come in with my add a little bit more into these areas so it's not quite as noticeable. Okay, add the embossing on that. It's already hot, so it should go fairly fast. There we go. Okay, much better. Alright. So now we're going to bring in our hole punch. Make sure this is cool. And we're going to figure out what part of it we want to punch out. Probably should have stamped over this way a little bit more, but okay. We're going to punch that out. Alright, we're going to adhere this to the front of our gold piece. It's going to go just inside those stitching lines. It's like almost covers up the stitching lines. We're going to add some dimensionals on the back of this. Just use 3. I'll take those backs off. Okay, and I'm going to bring in this piece. I'm going to figure out where I want to put this. About here, I think. Set it down. I'm going to bring in my ribbon. That's going to go just below it. So I'm going to flip this over like this. I'm going to come in with my seal. I'm going to add a little seal on the back of this. Whoops, let's go this way so I can, there we go. And I'll tack down one side. I'm going to flip it over. Wrap it around. You want it to be tight but not bowing the card. Stick it in that tape. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and adhere this with, let's just use the Tombow Mono on the back. Center it up on the front of the card. Okay, now I have a bow that I've already tied with that boho indigo. I'm going to bring in a glue dot. I'll actually probably use 2 because it's a kind of stiff ribbon. Add my bow. Foof it. There we go. There's the card we just made together. There's the one I did previously. Well, thank you for joining me at Jamie's Craft Table. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can find a little bit of time to play with some stamps, ink, and paper.